Hi, everyone. My name is Becky Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO of Weaving Influence, and I'm so thrilled to be here today with Paul Thornton as we talk about his new book, Leadership, Finding Your Sweet Spot. Welcome, Paul. How are you today?
I'm good, Becky. Thank you.
It's great to be here, and we have so much that we can learn about with you today, and we're looking forward to that. But as you're coming in, we want to make sure that you're aware of all the technical considerations for today's event. First of all, we are recording today's event, and we will make the recording available in the event that you would like to share it with friends, colleagues, anyone that you might want to share it with, or in case you want to re-watch it later. We also do have some slides today, and we will make those slides available to you later as a PDF. We do want to welcome you at this time to say hello in the chat, and as you do so, we invite you to use the drop-down menu. Please select all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your comments and interact with you. And if you happen to be calling in from an organization, we would love to hear about that as well. So please feel free to share the name of your organization, and I may be able to shout you out. So welcome to Gary in Orange, California, to Daryl in North Carolina, to Jane in St. Louis. Welcome to my friend Angie in Dubuque, Iowa, and to Erica in North Carolina. Erica works for the North Carolina Department of Revenue. Welcome in Tennessee, Chicago, LA. These are coming in really fast right now. Lorraine, who's in Orlando with crew. A friend from the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. I'm seeing lots of different states, and we're so glad that you have all chosen to invest with us today. Welcome to Paul Fine. Wow, so lots of organizations, lots of states. We're so happy to have you here. Hi, Lynn from Anderson University in Anderson, Indiana. We're grateful that you're choosing to invest this time to learn with us today, and we trust that this will be a valuable event for you. And wow, hello in the Philippines and in Italy, and another caller from the Mayo Clinic. Mayo, well, one of these days I'll get it right, I think. It's Mayo, right? Like the month, Mayo? Somebody tell me. Yes, okay, so in the event that you would like to live tweet today, we would love to hear about your insights on Twitter today. And Kelly will type in the chat that hashtag that we're going to use. And we would invite you to interact with us on Twitter throughout today's event and share with others what you're learning. So before we dive into today's content, I want to take a moment to introduce Paul to you. We were having some fun before the call, getting acquainted on some topics that I didn't know, even though Paul and I have known each other for a while now. For example, Paul played hockey as a college student. He has 2 children and 5 grandsons. In addition to those personal details, Paul is an author, a speaker, and an adjunct professor of business administration. He studied management, psychology, and political science at Ohio University, and then later earned an MBA from American International College and a Master of Education degree from Suffolk University. He's the author of 15 books, and the latest is the one that we are focused on today, Leadership, Finding Your Sweet Spot. You can also find additional content from Paul on YouTube, where he has over 28 management and leadership videos for you to learn from, and also on slideshare.net, where Paul has shared some various presentations that you can access later. So welcome, Paul. I'm really excited to learn from you and be inspired by you today. I will be back throughout the broadcast to bring some of your questions to Paul, so we invite you to put those in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. So thank you so much, Paul, for being with us today.
Thank you, Becky, for having me. I'm excited. So let me go to my slides.
Just a quick note about the slides. We want to make sure that you know that you can adjust your screen to view the slides and Paul in the same size. There's a drop-down menu, and if you select the side-by-side option, you'll be able to see the slides and the cameras in the right proportion. Paul, it looks like at the moment, though, I can see your notes with your slides rather than the full slide.
All right.
While we're sorting out the technical issues, let's see, while we're sorting out the technical issues, I'm going to use our daily prompt from the Daily Connection. We've been asking folks to share what they're grateful for. So if you would like to take a moment to share that with us, we would love to hear it. You know, I'm grateful that even when the technology doesn't work, we still have the opportunity to learn and adjust. So thank you. Jessica is grateful to be working from home. Love that. Daryl is grateful for continued health and wellness, grateful for warm weather, grateful that we can all connect here. Paul, it looks like we're still viewing your edits on the side. I'm not sure if you can just begin the slideshow. Or
That's
just
okay.
you want to
Yeah,
just dive in?
Let's go. Yep. Let's
okay,
go.
let's
Yep.
just go. And thanks for all the people who are sharing what they're grateful for.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm excited to have you as an audience. I appreciate your time and attention. So a few years back, I was reading about a college professor who at the beginning of the semester would give each student a plant like the one you see in the picture. And he would say to them, take care of it, help it grow. And then at the end of the semester, the students had to bring the plant back in, see how they did. And as you might imagine, some of the plants look like this. Some students just totally forgot about the plant, you know, didn't take care of it, didn't think about it, not good. There was another group of students that gave the plant too much water or too much sunlight or too much plant food or not enough plant food. But anyway, they didn't do what was needed and the plant died. Again, not good. There was, though, some students that their plants got healthy, they got stronger. These students gave the plant or found out what the plant needed in terms of water, sunlight, plant food, pruning, etc. So how does this relate to leadership? Well, all of you are tasked with helping your employees grow and develop, right? And you do a variety of things to make that happen. If you had to boil it down to 3 things that you do, I think it's these 3. You direct, you discuss, you delegate. When you direct, you basically tell people what to do, you set goals, develop plans, you coach, you give feedback. All those types of things relate to directing. Secondly, you discuss, you ask questions, you collaborate, you probe, you dig, that type of thing. And thirdly, you delegate. You empower, you give people authority to figure out how to get things done. So these 3 you do each and every day. I think in the same meeting, matter of fact, you do all 3. The big question, though, are you doing the right amount of each of those 3 things? Your sweet spot is that spot on the continuum where what you say and what you do makes the maximum impact. So here's a couple of examples. This person is coaching his baseball team. He's providing them with instructions and information. Too much information is as bad as too little information. Too much coaching is as bad as too little coaching. Again, we need to find the optimum amount. I had a tennis lesson a couple years back, and the tennis instructor was telling me 9 things to remember on my backhand. Again, way too much information. I couldn't remember it all, couldn't process it all. Not good. Second example, we've all been in those meetings where the discussion goes on and on and on, right? There's no closure. That's not good. On the other hand, sometimes the leader of the meeting makes a decision very quickly and people feel like they didn't have a chance to weigh in and contribute their thoughts and ideas. So again, you need to find the optimum point. How much discussion makes sense? Some people engage in too much collaboration, others not enough. this person obviously isn't delegating as much as he should. He's maybe a control freak, who knows, but he needs to be involved in all the decisions, all the issues, problems. Again, that's not good, you know. On the other hand, too much delegation, if we over delegate to people, we burden them and overwhelm them, and that burns them out after a period of time. So again, we need to find the optimal point of what makes sense. So in all these things, we got to figure out what is the right amount for each situation. And I'm not saying that the sweet spot is like in the middle of this continuum. It's not. There are times when you need to be at the max. You know, there's times, for example, where you need to give people really candid, direct feedback. There's other times when you need to plant seeds and make suggestions and things like that. So each situation is unique. Finding your sweet spot in that situation is challenging but important. So how do you find your sweet spot? Big question. Well, one thing you can do is you can improve your diagnostic skills. You know, like the doctor here, we all have to make sense of the situation that we're in. We can look at, for example, the numbers, that the numbers always tell a story about what's going on. We can look at people's feelings, right? What are they feeling? That tells us something. We also can look at, are people able? Do they have the knowledge, skills, experience to make the change that's required? Are they willing? Do they have the motivation, the energy, the time? You know, these days people's plates are overflowing, so, you know, are they even able to do what you want them to do? So diagnosing the current situation's first thing you got to do. Number two, you can ask for feedback. You know, ask the people in your group for feedback. Am I delegating the right amount or too much? Am I giving you enough information or too much? When I coach you, am I simplifying things and giving you what you need to move forward? Get feedback from them and figure out what changes you might need to make. And thirdly, you can experiment. You know, on the continuum here, you can change your approach a little bit, do a little bit more coaching or a little bit less, or provide people a little bit more information or less. You know, where do you need to make adjustments? So again, you're in your sweet spot, that spot where you're going to have the maximum contribution. So when you're in your sweet spot, you know, you hear lots of positive things like this. Your guidance was perfect. You know, you told me exactly what I needed to hear, or that was the exact feedback I needed. People get exactly what they need to help them move forward and progress. That's the ideal.
So at this point, we want to stop and see if there are any questions or comments, and we invite you to put those in the chat. And I remember, Paul, as we were preparing for this event, one of the things that you and I talked about was a misconception that I had, that each person has their own sweet spot as a leader, and that's how they show up in every situation. And one of the things that I gained so far today is this idea that every situation is different, and so we need to be alert to and observant about what our sweet spot is in each individual situation that we face. So as you're listening today, what questions are surfacing for you? We would love to see those in the chat. And we welcome those. So Connie is wondering, is the sweet spot more situational or according to personal style?
I think it's more situational. I think, again, the leader is trying to help his or her people grow and develop, make the positive changes that need to be made. So the leader needs to diagnose, what do they need to do? And it varies from person to person or situation to situation. as I say, sometimes you need to provide a fair amount of coaching, other times very little. So you got to diagnose what's needed in this situation that will move the ball forward and help the team or individual perform at a higher level. So yeah, the challenge I think for leaders is this idea of diagnosing and figuring out what can I do as leader to help people grow and develop. It's not an easy solution or not an easy thing to figure out always, you know, because each situation is unique and different, and you know, so yeah, I think that's important.
Well, and I think that that's a really interesting distinction, Paul, because I have to think about how I'm showing up at a meeting. So am I showing up at a meeting with the idea of how can I help my people learn and develop, or am I showing up at a meeting to try to get my own outcome achieved? And I think, you know, it would be difficult to diagnose how to lead most effectively if you don't start with that mindset that I'm going to look at every situation thinking about how people can grow and develop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the
yeah,
job
sorry
of
about
a
that.
leader, that's okay. I think the job of a leader is to help people become more and achieve more than they thought possible. So it's really not so much about you, the leader, but it's figuring out what does the individual or team need to perform at a higher level. And as I say, that's the challenging part, the diagnosis and figuring out where can I help, where can I add value.
That makes sense. So there are a few more questions that have come in. So Paul says, observation based on experience, his job as a leader is to make sure his team is successful individually and as a team, and taking his ego out of the equation helps. And Mary Jean has a follow-up question. Does this leadership sweet spot idea imply that a leadership needs to have multiple styles?
Yes, actually the 3 Ds that I talked about, we can equate those to leadership styles, directing style, discussing style, delegating style. So although I didn't label them as styles, we can think about those as leadership styles as well.
That makes sense. And let's see, someone else is asking, is this tied to the type of culture you are in? So how does the organization's culture affect being able to diagnose and find your leadership sweet spot?
Well, I think there are many levels of understanding the situation you're in. The big picture view is the organizational culture, structure, key systems, that type of thing. So that's like one level of diagnosis. Then you can bring it down to your department or your team. What's going on there? What's the culture of the team? What will help the individual? So there's lots of different ways of looking at it. I've been a big believer that the leader needs to look at their immediate group that they're leading and figure out what can I do to help them grow and develop and, you know, be the best that they can be.
That's helpful. So we do have a few more questions here. Christine is wondering how you help others when they aren't growing at the rate that you might be expecting.
Well, I think the discussion part is important, asking them where they're at, what their goals are, what will help them advance. People, as a teacher, I've learned people don't always grow and learn according to your plan. Sometimes they, you know, have their own plan, and it takes time sometimes for them to see the light, so to speak. So you got to be patient, I think, as a leader, and you got to get them involved. What do they want? What are their goals? What would help them be more productive, efficient, effective, that type of thing.
Sure. So we'll take one more question now, and then we'll be back at the end for more. Paul is wondering if there are critical sweet spot competencies to be most effective as a leader.
Critical, say that question again, Becky.
Yeah, critical sweet spot competencies. So, you know, we talked about leadership styles with discuss and delegate and direct. So what might the competencies be?
Well, I think with each of those styles, you need to have certain skill sets. For example, to be good at directing, you need to be a good communicator, you need to be precise, you need to be clear. To be good at discussion, you need to be able to ask good questions. You need to ask good follow-up questions. The better the questions, the better the discussion. To delegate effectively, you need to believe in people. You need to have confidence in them. You need to give them some freedom to do it their way, not your way. So I think each of those three approaches, there's some thoughts and skills that you need to be really competent at that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to a couple more things. As a leader, you also have to find your sweet spot in terms of the right ratio or the right balance between a number of things. For example, and this is a small example or a small number of examples. As a leader, you focus on the big picture and the details. You focus on the present and future, task and people. You talk and listen, manage and lead. So there's a lot of things that you do as a leader that you have to find the right balance. For example, how much time do you spend in your staff meeting talking about present problems versus future opportunities? How much time do you spend talking about the task or the work we have to get done, this week or this month versus how the people are doing? So what is your ratio? What is the right balance? Let's talk about manager leader. Today, you need to be both manager and leader, right? The question is, in what combination? How much time do I spend managing? How much time do I spend leading? My view of management is managers use current methods and procedures to get the work done. Leaders, on the other hand, focus on change. They want to change the status quo. They want to change the structure or the process or the culture, something. They have a vision of how things can be better. Now, my view is we need both. We need to be both manager and leader, but in the right combination. So what happens if you have a situation where you're overmanaged but underled? Overmanaged, too much stability, not enough change. That's not good, right? When you have that situation, you're not keeping up with the competition. You're not keeping up maybe with customer demands, so that's problematic. The other side of the coin, what happens if you're overled but undermanaged? Too much change, not enough stability. That's not good either. That creates kind of a chaotic, crazy environment. I was reading about one company that had 18 change initiatives going on at the same time. Think about that. Employees were stressed out. They didn't know what the priorities were. They were getting exhausted. They were getting confused on what was important. They were getting headaches and their situation looked like this person. When we don't get the ratio correct, this is what happens. Ouch, right? Not good. So again, we want to find the right ratio. The right ratio refers again to our sweet spot. So a couple things we can do here. Again, we can, number one, get an idea of what is our current ratio? How much time do I spend currently focused on current problems versus future opportunities? How much time do I spend currently managing versus leading? So what's my benchmark? What's my current situation? And does it make sense, or should I make some minor changes there? Number two, I can observe other leaders. You attend staff meetings, your boss, how much time does your boss spend on current problems and future possibilities? How much does your boss spend on dealing with the big picture versus important details? What's the ratio? Thirdly, you can experiment. You can, again, try some different techniques, different approaches, different ratios, and see if your results improve. Do things get better or not? So again, when you hit your sweet spot, you hear things like this. Your message was the perfect blend of realism and optimism. Or that was a great discussion of the present problems and future opportunities. You nail it, you get the right balance, you have the right ratio, perfect, well done, things are great.
So we have quite a few questions that have come in since the last break for questions, and I'm going to actually start with the most recent one and we can work our way back, but we do invite you to continue to put your questions in the chat. So Kate is wondering, do you feel the most effective teams consist of people with similar sweet spots or diverse sweet spots, and why?
I think the sweet spot I'm referring to is more the leader figuring out what he or she needs to do to make a big difference. Teams, we need diverse sets of skills. We need people committed on the team to a common goal and common values and common beliefs. So I think each person on the team probably has a different need or situation of what would help them be more productive and effective. And again, that's the team leader's job to figure out, what is that? What can I do to make a difference?
So
Good
again,
question.
maybe, yeah, thank you. So let's see, there are a few more here. Ed from Cape Cod is wondering, with present circumstances, how do you suggest that managers be more flexible? Or how do you suggest flexibility?
Yeah, I think that's a key word: flexibility, adaptability, being agile. Being agile is talked about a lot these days. Being nimble, realizing that each situation is unique, each person is unique. So what can I do to figure out how I can add value? So yeah, you got to be flexible and adaptable. This COVID-19 situation has taught us all that the world can change so quickly, so dramatically. What can we as leaders do to make a difference? So we need to, be mindful of all the variables and all the factors and be open to trying some new and different things. Yeah.
So Lori is wondering if you have any advice for dealing with difficult staff members.
Yeah, I do. I think it's always good to meet with them one-on-one. I think it's good to describe their behavior. What exactly are they doing that you say is difficult? And I think I always like to explain the consequence of their behavior. If they yell and scream in meetings, well, what's the consequence of that? Or if they don't listen to their teammates, what's the consequence? They need to understand there's a business consequence to their behavior, right? And then I think you need to either direct them or discuss with them what changes do they need to make. Sometimes asking them what do they think they need to do differently going forward. A lot of times difficult people build or destroy relationships with teammates, and they're not people that people want to work with, or they don't want them on the team. So that becomes a real limiting factor for that person. So I think that's something you can do. And of course, we need to get things done. We are paid to accomplish certain goals. If the person doesn't make the required changes, then you got to go into discipline and take steps to, be more emphatic about that. If he or she doesn't make those changes, then there's some really negative consequences that you don't want, unfortunately.
That's helpful. I think what stands out to me the most, Paul, is the importance of identifying the behavior. And that's something that I have to constantly remind myself of, that the more specific you can be in communicating the behavior that's the issue, the better off you'll be. So here's a really broad question that came from Thomas, and he's wondering what the best way is to learn leadership practices.
I think you can, read about it. You can read books. You can go to seminars, attend podcasts like this, but you need to get out there and do things, right? You need to take a leadership role. You need to try to influence people, and just start with one person. Try to influence one person to see a bigger possibility for themselves, and see what happens, So yeah, get out there, try it, learn from it, study other people that you consider good leaders. What do they do? How do they influence and inspire people? Set the example is always a good thing you can do as well. So yeah.
That's helpful, thank you.
Get out there and do it.
So here's a question from Christopher, and he's wondering how you find your leadership sweet spot when you don't have a leadership role. So as a non-leader, if you've been delegated a role with other leadership team members as participants. So it sounds like, Christopher, you may be finding yourself leading a group of other leaders and wondering how you can rise to that occasion.
Well, I think, first of all, have confidence in yourself and think about the other people in your team or group, their performance. What are they doing well? Where could they improve? What do you think you could do to help them perform at a higher level? And then the question is always, how are you going to influence and inspire them to make changes? Again, leadership is not an easy thing. Getting people to change is not easy by any stretch, right? So yeah, try influencing them in various ways and see what happens. But just because you don't have the formal title of leader doesn't mean you can't take some leadership actions to try to improve the situation.
Sure. So Paul, I'm wondering if you would share with us any stories about your experiences as a leader and describe in what way you would identify when to use that discuss approach, the delegate approach, or the direct approach. And I want to also invite folks to add more questions in the chat. We do have time to take several more. So if you have some questions that you'd like Paul to address, please feel free to put those in. And there's one that I haven't asked yet, and I will get there, I promise.
Yeah, going back to diagnosing the situation, is the person able and willing? How ready are they to make a change? If I diagnose the person and I find that they're lacking in knowledge and skills and maybe even motivation, I probably need to use more of a directing style, telling them what the goal is, what changes are required and why. So telling them is probably the best way to go. If the person has some experience and some know-how and they've got some talents and skills, maybe we discuss what they think the change should be and why and how would it work and what are the obstacles. Get them involved in the steps that need to be taken. If a person is really capable and ready to move on and make required changes, of course you can delegate to them, let them figure it out, let them come up with the plan that they're going to implement. So again, it varies depending on the situation. if you use the wrong style, I do know that demotivates people, right? If I'm directing a highly talented, highly experienced person and micromanaging them, they're not happy, right? If I should be delegating much more and letting them, do their thing, and yet I'm telling them step by step what they need to do, they're going to be very turned off and demotivated. So that's not good. We want to use a style that fits the needs of the situation. That's key.
That's helpful. So April has a question. She's wondering how you get your manager who may struggle with delegating to delegate more once you've been put in a leadership role.
Well, I think I would go to the manager and I would have a discussion and I would ask him or her if I could take on this project or this responsibility, whatever it might be, because I feel I'm able to do it, I'm capable, and I would ask, give me a try. Let me see what I can do. If you're not happy with the results, then we can talk about it down the road, but ask and oftentimes you shall receive. So try that. The boss might be more than happy to delegate, because every time a boss delegates, it frees them up some of their time and they can spend time on more strategic things or, alignment issues or who knows what.
That's helpful. So April, hopefully that gives you some direction on how to deal with your manager. Christine is wondering if you have any suggestions for those who think they're very intelligent but not taking the right steps, or, it sounds to me like, Christine, maybe you're looking for an idea of how to coach someone who thinks they're smarter than you are, but I could be wrong about that.
Well, I would suggest maybe asking them what they did or why they did what they did. What's their rationale? Why did they do X, Y, Z? They may have a reason or reasons you didn't even expect or understand, but get their thinking. Your thinking or you may see a bigger picture or realize that they need to make some changes and they don't even realize that. So you need to explain that to them, what changes are required and why. Most people want to know not only why changes or what changes are needed, but why. Why do we have to cut cycle time from 2 months to 1 week? Why is that needed? Why do we have to cut costs by 30%? If you have the business or can explain the business case why the change is needed, then people might be or will be a lot more open to your thoughts and ideas.
So
Yeah.
Christine, I hope that gives you some ideas. It sounds like curiosity is key. I'm wondering, Paul, if we could take a few minutes to tell people about what else they'll find in the book beyond some of the key ideas that you shared today.
Well, the first part of the book gets into what we talked about at the beginning, the idea of finding your sweet spot on a continuum of options you have. And some of the topics deal with what you need to do, but some of them also deal with your personal characteristics like confidence. Having too much confidence is as bad as having too little confidence. Or being open. There's a lot of talk today about being transparent and being open. Certainly that's good, but can you be too open? I knew one leader that was so open that they revealed everything and their team started to have doubts whether this person really could lead them, so that's not good. So again, personal traits and qualities of the leader, there's a fine line there too, where you can go too far one way or the other. So the first part of the book deals with a number of things around this continuum idea. Some of the topics deal with what you need to do as a leader. Some of them deal with personal traits or characteristics you have as a leader. The second part of the book deals with what we talked about, finding that balance or ratio between two related things. You know, it's like a baseball player. They got to catch the ball and throw the ball. Well, as leaders, there's a number of things we need to do that are related or connected, and we got to figure out what's the right balance, as I said, or ratio for those things. The other thing that I think it's a good book, not that I wrote it, but I think there's a lot of examples in the book of other leaders who have found their sweet spot. And it describes what they did and how, or steps they took to find their sweet spot and how it's helped them be more productive and effective. So I think I interviewed probably 30 to 40 leaders, and their thoughts and examples are included in the book. So
Well, I think the other thing I like about the book is the self-reflection questions that you include, so that as you're reading the various stories, you can think about yourself as a leader.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that's important.
Got it. So we do have a question from Megan, and she's wondering if she wants to stand out as a leader, but she's not currently in a leadership position, what characteristics should she work to develop so that she can stand out as a leader?
My wife always reminds me that it all really comes down to performance. So perform, let your performance speak for itself. Your performance can separate you from the crowd. So perform in your current job, exceed expectations. When you exceed expectations, you stand out, right? Now, as a leader, you also can stand out by coming up with ideas that are, you know, unique, different, insightful. So when you're in meetings, when you're with groups, you know, offer your ideas confidently, and be willing to take a stand for why your idea makes sense and why it could add value and that type of thing. So yeah.
I hope that's helpful, Megan. That's encouraging to hear, I think, Paul, that your performance is something that can help you stand out, because that seems very much within, you know, our control in terms of choosing how we want to show up and do our jobs to our best ability.
Yep.
So Mary Jean is wondering if you can identify a leader, potentially maybe one that you talk about in the book, who has mastered this idea of the sweet spots.
Well, one leader that I admired and studied was Pat Summitt, who is the women's basketball coach at the University of Tennessee. And I think what made her unique, I mean, she had high standards and high expectations, which all leaders do. But she, you know, used an approach and style to fit the needs of the situation. Another coach that I admire is Gino Auriemma at UConn. And I went to a leadership conference he had a couple years ago, and he made the point that with each of his players, he tries to find that one thing that will motivate them and move them up to greatness. And he made the point that each player is different. And he studies and really gets to know the player, and as I say, tries to identify that unique factor that he then can use to motivate and challenge and energize that player to go to the next level. So that's those two leaders, and the similarity there is they were flexible and adaptable and try to figure out the thing that's going to motivate that player.
Those are helpful examples. So there's a question from Ronald regarding a book called Leadership in the 1-Minute Manager. And I think Randy also made a comment earlier about Ken Blanchard's situational leadership model of there being those 4 basic styles to leadership and managing people, which is dependent upon what the employee needs at the time. And they're both Ron and Randy were wondering if you've read the book and what your thoughts are about how those styles work.
I went to Ohio University, and I was fortunate to have Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard as my teachers or professors. Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard came up with the situational leadership model, which I'm very familiar with. Paul Hersey actually taught his class according to the model. He used all 4 styles, and it was great. So I'm familiar with what they've done. I condensed my approach down a little bit from 4 styles to 3. I think it makes all the sense in the world that you need to use a style that fits the needs of the situation. So I think their approach got me excited about leadership, and like I say, I've been developing my little 3-part model over the years, and I actually did share it with Paul Hersey when he was alive, and he gave me some feedback on it. But anyway, I think that approach is very logical and makes sense, and yeah, I'm for that.
Thanks, Paul. So another question about finding your sweet spot. So I think one of the things that was clear today is that you need to find your sweet spot in each situation. And so if our leadership style needs to change based on the situation and the people we're leading, this listener is wondering how you know when you've reached your leadership sweet spot, or is that something that we would aspire to in each situation to find the sweet spot for that moment?
I think your sweet spot is when the actions you're taking, what you're saying or what you're doing is having a maximum positive result. You know, when you're producing great results, that is, you're helping people, it's, they're improving, performance is going in the right direction. Whatever you said or did in that situation is your sweet spot, and you're making a difference and you're adding value.
Thanks for clarifying that. I appreciate it. So we do have time still in the hour for a few more questions if you have some. There was a question earlier that I promised I would get back to, and it was related to, as you're teaching others, what the best approach might be. It's kind of a complicated question. But the question is, what do you believe is better for the coach or consultant to choose between or plan a presentation? Is it better to have, to use a simple presentation template as a reference and build the story or examples as needed, or to prepare the presentation material more as like a perfect dissertation? Yeah, I don't know. This is a really complicated question. What would be your best tips for planning the right kind of content to make a difference for your audience?
Okay. Well, a couple thoughts on that. I think whenever you're presenting, I think it helps to start by thinking about the audience, right? Who's in the audience? What are their needs? What are their issues? What's their top priority? What's going on with them? And then backing up, what is your big idea? What is the main point or point you want to get across, and why? I've seen loads of presentations where the big idea gets buried, or you walk away and you're not sure what the big idea was, right? So that's important. And then once you have your big idea, I think then you got to think about, what do you do to develop and support that big idea? What type of stories, examples, illustrations will you use? What evidence do you need to provide to support your big idea? And then finally, you need a conclusion. You know, what do you want the audience to do? What's the takeaway? What's the action item for the audience? You know, that type of thing. So I don't know if that answers the question, but those are some
Well,
thoughts anyway.
and I apologize, I didn't articulate your question very well. So speaking of big ideas and takeaways, Paul, I don't know if you had some slides that you wanted to show in terms of how people can stay in touch with you after today's event. I know that you're welcoming folks to email you. Obviously, we encourage you to get the book. And Kelly is putting that link in the chat for you. Paul, what are you hoping that people will take away from today's call? What are you hoping people will do?
I'm hoping that you will think about some of the things we talked about, and I hope you'll buy my book. Not that I'm trying to sell books per se, but I think there's some information and guidance in there that will help you be a better leader. And I think we're all on this journey to keep improving, to keep growing. So we need ideas and thoughts of how we can do it better. I think, and I truly believe, if you get better and better at diagnosing and figuring out the situation and can say and do things that will hit the mark, you'll be in your sweet spot, you'll make a difference, and really that's what you want to do. So the more you do that, you will move from being a good leader to a great leader. Great leaders are adaptable and flexible, and they find, or they're good at figuring out what's the one thing I can say or do that's going to make a big difference. So I think that's what I'd like to see people take away from this hour.
Thank you, Paul. So if you have any ideas, yeah. Go ahead.
I do have my email, I do have in a slide. So if anyone has any additional questions, they could email me, or thoughts or ideas. Love to hear those as well.
Sure, Kelly will put that email address in the chat for you. I would also say, if there are any specific actions that you intend to take as a result of this call to move from being a good leader to a great leader, we can welcome those comments in the chat right now as well. And Paul, I think the thing that I'm taking away from today's call, and it's a simple takeaway, but an important one, is really understanding for myself what attitude I'm bringing to an interaction. So am I really showing up with my team every time wondering how I can help them grow or develop, or am I neglecting that important area of focus? And you said that toward the very beginning of the call, but I think it's easy as a leader to get wrapped up in our own agenda and not slow down enough to think about how we can use every interaction as a chance to grow and develop people. And, you know, since we have time, Megan was asking if you could share an example or a story from your life about when you realized you were in your leadership sweet spot. And we'll probably wrap up our time together with that last story.
Okay. Yeah. I think I teach now college students, and on occasion, sometimes I have a one-on-one discussion, and I take time to understand where the student's at, what their problem or issue is. I try to do a good job of listening and pinpointing the problem. And then we discuss, or I give some advice on what they could do or should do. I feel I'm in my sweet spot if I walk away with the advice and guidance I gave, seem to really hit the nail on the head, be perfect for what the situation was. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of other examples where I, misdiagnosed and I wasn't quite clear and I didn't give great advice. So again, it's a work in progress. So, but yeah, when you nail it in terms of that was exactly what that person needed to hear, that's going to help them improve and grow and develop and be a better person, student, performer, whatever it might be.
Thank you so much. Take care, and don't forget to get the book.
Okay. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, everyone that attended.